So maybe that's like an internal fear. If I do decide to go all in, maybe I'm not actually good at those things.
I could have just flat out done better. So
Yeah.
because I was comparing myself, I was flat out envious. And because of that, it made me miserable.
One of the benefits of comparing yourself almost to a fault, I think, is like building that resilience, the mental toughness.
I think what can help as a solution to not to get too down on oneself is what's going on, everyone. In today's episode, Zach and I discuss a topic that I think most people are going to find extremely relatable: comparing yourself to others. We talk about everything from the negatives that can come from that, the personal experiences that we have with it, how social media plays a big role with it, and we even talk about some of the positives that can come from comparing yourself with others. I know you're going to absolutely love this episode, so without further ado, let's dive in. Have you ever found yourself struggling with comparing where your physique is right now or in the past with the physique of other people? Like, do you ever find yourself wishing that there were certain parts of your physique that were similar to someone else's?
Um, Honestly, I don't think I've ever really compared my physique with someone else's. Like, I haven't like, oh, I want to look like that. I think I've like admired other people's physique, like, oh, they look awesome, but I've never really, said, oh, I want to look like that. I think most of my comparison has just been with myself, like knowing that I could need to do better or get in shape or lose some fat and build some muscle. So it's almost been like an internal comparison using other people as like a model of maybe that's what I should strive for, but it's never be like me comparison with the random guy there or that random guy there. So I think yes, but almost to more for me to then internally reflect on what I need to do. But I will say, after getting into the bodybuilding, it's definitely highlighted this. I think this is one of the struggles, one of the things like bodybuilding, the body dysmorphia, kind of that whole realm is definitely highlighted. And I think it takes a mature approach to do it. I'm glad I got into it a little bit later as I've been more mature and more confident. Because right now I'm struggling with the comparing myself with what I looked like 3 months ago. I never really, even there on the stage, didn't compare myself with the others out there because it is what it is at the end of the day. And I know I put in some good work to get the physique that I had. But now seeing like what I was and now I am, so it's harder. It's for me, I'm comparing myself against me. Because someone else could have worked harder than me. Someone could have better genetics than me. Someone could have done whatever else different than me. So I've never really wanted to compare myself with them because whatever their circumstances are, maybe they just worked harder than me. But now it's like I see what I look like then, what I look like now, and that is tough to swallow, even though, and I know there's a reason I am where I am and I have a long-term goal and all these other things. So a long way of answering a yes, no.
Well, that's interesting. Something I'm wondering about is you mentioned that it's something that's hard for you to compare your past self with, or I should say, with beating your past self, beating the last version of you on stage. That's something that's hard for you. Why do you think
Mhm.
that's something you struggle with?
I think I'm just in general, I'm very competitive. Because I was actually thinking about this too, not just for the bodybuilding, but so last year was the first time I ran the marathon. So I really had no expectations. So whatever I did was a success. Last year was the first time I did a bodybuilding show. Had no expectations, right? And I know we joked about this. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get embarrassed or not. I think you were like secretly like, no, you'll do fine. But you didn't want to let me know. Now the issue is I've set this bar and I want to beat it. I feel like if I don't do better this year, I'm like, that's failure. That's backwards progress. So I don't really consider myself like if I don't beat the other person because they could have just worked harder or they could have had a better start. They've been doing it longer. So when I go and run the marathon, if someone's faster than me, they're faster than me. And it is what it is. I don't really stress about that. But if I run slower, like for me, that's the problem. So I think it's a competitiveness, and I think it's me always wanting to improve. Um, but obviously, I don't think that's realistic. Like Father Time catches up to everyone, and your focus and energy can't go to everything. Like I'm not nearly the trumpet player I used to be, so therefore, I don't really. It's weird because I get frustrated, but then there's like it's like a pendulum. If I get so bad and I'm not good anymore, then I just let it go and I don't stress about it anymore. But if I'm trying to hold on, that's very stressful mentally. It's like, okay, I have to perform, I have to do well. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, it definitely does. Do you feel like it's almost a fear, something that you're worried about? Like you're thinking about the next
Mm.
time you're on stage. Are you worried that you're not going to be able to surpass your past competition physique?
Um, yeah, I think so. I don't know if I would call it like a fear. Maybe like more of like a disappointment if I don't do it. Yeah, it's just hard because you want to progress, and theoretically you should be able to because you've learned from your mistakes in the past. You should only optimize. Um, so yeah, I think maybe a little bit of fear, not insecurity, but just something that wanting to improve. I've always been very competitive. I've always like I've always been like this jack of all trades, master of none. And so I think um as I get better in certain things, I get that taste of what it's really like. And then I just make that cost benefit analysis to like decide if I'm going to go all in or not. And a lot of things I haven't gone all in on. So maybe that's like an internal fear. If I do decide to go all in, maybe I'm not actually good at those things. And so instead I just kind of average for a lot of things. But I feel like fitness is I think we've talked about this in the past. Fitness is like maybe one of the first things where maybe I have a genuine passion for it and maybe I have some natural talent in it. So now it's like, okay, do I really send it? You know, and like we said in the past, I don't want that just to be my identity either. So if that's all I do and I still fail, then it's like, what am I doing?
Right. That's interesting. I can kind of relate to that in not that exact context, but in the past I've been afraid to say things like I want to compete to win. I've always wanted to win
Mm, mhm.
every time I've competed, but I felt like just in vocalizing, publicly announcing that I'm competing because I want to win,
Mhm.
it's it's it almost makes me more vulnerable
Yeah,
to losing
pressure.
because, like, if I say yeah, the pressure, it's like, okay, so if I publicly announce that I'm gonna win, for example, and I don't win, then I'm
Mhm.
not gonna look so good if that
Yeah.
happens, and
Does
there's
that
like,
make
I
you a
think
failure?
yeah, yeah,
Mm,
and so in the past, I have refrained from saying I'm doing this to win for that exact reason, so I think that's kind of the same
yeah,
concept as like you mentioned, it's like you're almost worried, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, you're almost worried to, like, go all in on
yeah,
this, like, prep, for example, like, if you do go all in and you don't do as well as you'd hope, then it's like, "Well, shoot, I'm a failure."
yeah.
Is that
Well,
is that kinda
it's
what you mean?
yeah, no, it's interesting because it's kind of funny how when you're saying that last year we joked about like, okay, I'm just going to do it. I have no expectations, right? And maybe that's why I performed well because I didn't have this burden on myself. Um, and that would be, I think, for both the marathon and the bodybuilding, I exceeded my expectations. But now I have expectations. I'm a little bit nervous about it, both for the marathon and the bodybuilding. Like the marathon is a little bit easier because it's like there's a time I can objectively try to beat, and if I beat that time, there's progress. Um, Whereas like the bodybuilding, I could think that I look better, but I could lose subjectively if someone's better. So like there's a little bit of that. You know deep down what you brought, and does the placement doesn't always matter. Um, but I already have put that pressure on me by kind of joking by saying I'm going to do the show in February and I'm going to win it. I'm going to get my pro card because I think I was so close and knowing that it's in the cards. But now there's pressure. And if I don't win, then I'm gonna have to do another show. But the thing that I think helps me overcome it is I'm very stubborn and I'm very driven. And so I will do something until I hit that goal. And then maybe I hit that goal and I say, you know what? In reflection, that probably wasn't worth all the energy and time and sacrifices. So I'm probably just gonna hang it up. Like I'm not gonna do it anymore. Like I think that's okay, but I've proven to myself that I'm gonna get there. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is a little bit of fear, insecurity with it, a little bit like put that pressure on myself. But I think it's a good type of pressure to push yourself to improve.
Yeah, I was just thinking that I'm willing to bet that because you ha you feel that little bit of extra pressure, I bet you that's gonna be what pushes you to actually beat your past physique, is to have that extra
Mhm.
little bit of a fire under your butt, that feeling in the back of your head. I think
Yeah,
that's gonna be something that actually pushes you to reach whatever your potential is for the next time you're on stage.
yeah. Now, kind of mentioning like the bodybuilding and how it could be subjective in some sense. How have you handled, because you've done multiple shows, right? Like, and how do you manage that when you feel like you bring a good physique, but then maybe the judges disagree, or maybe just a monster shows up and you look at these people and you're like, oh man, I ain't it. But then not getting in your head about it and saying, you know what, though, I improved from last time. I brought my best physique. Like, how do you handle that comparison?
I've handled it differently for every show. So for my first show, similar to you, like I didn't have any expectations going into it. I ended up doing pretty well, and it was awesome. For the next show, I also didn't have a ton of expectations. I kind of went into it relatively last minute. I was already pretty lean. It was during COVID, so no one knew if shows were going to be going or not, and this show was going to still be being put on. And but I didn't have a lot of expectations because I was like, I don't know if anyone's even going to be there. I don't know, like I just don't know what it's going to be like. So I didn't
Yeah.
really have any expectations, and that was a ton of fun. I came second in that one, but again, I wasn't super invested in winning. I wanted to win, but I wasn't like I didn't put it all in the line because my
Mhm.
expectations were pretty low because I didn't know what the circumstances of that show were going to look like during the pandemic. And then the next show, this was the toughest one. This is where I decided I want to win it all, and
Mm. But you didn't
I
vocalize this.
I didn't vocalize it. I didn't tell people, but
Yeah.
internally, my goodness, did I ever want it? And I knew that I would have to get leaner than I'd ever been before. Like I thought I would have to lose an extra 5-10 pounds. And throughout the way, I was self coached for this prep, and the first part went really well. I was really happy with how I was looking, but then I got to a point where I did really get into the into comparing myself to
Mm.
other natural bodybuilders and other natural bodybuilders that I might be competing against. And I remember looking at a couple of them. I know exactly who too. I can see the photos in my
Yeah.
head still. And I remember thinking like, man, I got to get that lean and I got to look like that and I got to look better than these guys.
Mhm.
So I'm directly comparing myself and thinking I need to look better and better condition, more muscular than these guys. And the byproduct of that, in short, was a pretty miserable last
Mm.
12 weeks of that prep. Was just like looking at these photos every single day, looking at my photos, thinking I don't look that good. And I wasn't advanced as them. So in
Yeah.
retrospect, I was never going to look as good as them. And I didn't for that prep.
Mhm.
But in retrospect, I look back, it's like there's no chance I was going to look as good as them. So
Yeah.
there's genetics that play a role. My genetics, at least at that stage of the game, were not in alignment with where their genetics were. I also wasn't going to get as like at least the look as lean or as
Yeah.
conditioned as them. I wasn't mentally ready. I got close,
Mhm.
but I ended up looking pretty washed over by the end because of how stressed I made myself, and
Yeah.
I didn't peak very well because I was stressed and made some weird peak week decisions because of the
Mhm.
stress, I think. But ultimately, that part of the prep took away from a lot of the potential joy that I could have got from it. And also, I could have just flat out done better. So
Yeah.
because I was comparing myself, I was flat out envious. I was
Mm.
envious of other bodybuilders. And because of that, it made me miserable. It made me
Yeah.
doubt myself, think I wasn't uh, good enough, and it left me beating myself up more, or
Yeah.
maybe I shouldn't say that. It left me wishing I was one of these guys instead. It left me wishing I had different genetics. It left me wishing
Interesting.
wishing my muscles looked different, that I could get leaner, that it's just
Yeah.
different. And part of it was good because it drove me to keep improving, to keep getting better, to keep digging, to keep getting leaner, to keep training
Hmm.
hard. But it ended up being more negative than anything else because it took away so much joy, stressed me out more than I ought to have been.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, what I think I should have done was just focus on what where I was at the time, what
Hmm.
my potential was at my time, stayed in my lane, still did absolutely the best I possibly could, but just without wishing I was basically someone else, one of these other natural bodybuilders. So
Yeah.
that's that prep. That was my third prep. That was not even that long ago. That was 2021.
Okay.
That was a tough one. That really took away from it. And then after that point, I started to figure it out. I
Yeah.
chilled out a lot after that, and I haven't
Did
had.
you come to that naturally, or did you talk to someone about it, or like, how did that, or were you like, hey, results, man, like it didn't, I feel awful, I looked awful, like, so obviously what I did wasn't working, or did you just like, hey, let me talk to my coach about this, is how I feel, like, how do you think you reconciled that to prepare moving forward?
Good question. Thinking back, I didn't go out of my way to talk to anyone about that in particular. And I don't remember any specific aha moments in conversations or even just thinking to myself. I think it was like slowly I started to kind of accept that I've got my own genetics. I'm at
Hmm.
a stage in my natural bodybuilding journey that's going to lend myself to reaching a very specific potential that might not be the same as what some other advanced natural bodybuilders look like. And I think just slowly I came to terms with that and chilled right out. And I also think because that prep was so tough, it didn't go as well as I did. Okay, but
Hmm.
it just mentally taxed me so much, like it just
Yeah.
exhausted me, that I think just from being so drained from that, it kind of forced me to chill out from the
Yeah.
experience. I'm like that. I can be really stubborn where I have to learn things at their extreme the hard
Yeah.
way
The hard way.
sometimes.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's the best way to learn. And I feel like that was a kind of a lesson that I've learned
Hmm.
since then. And I still look at other natural bodybuilders now and I'm like, wow, like they look fantastic, but I don't feel the same kind of envy.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
more of I think you mentioned this earlier. It's more of an admiration, and but I'm able to accept that they've got different genetics. They maybe
Yeah.
have been training longer than me. We're just different people, and I can just
Yeah.
admire without feeling envious. I think there is a
Yeah.
difference. So, but that comes with I think time and experience. My fourth prep, the last prep I did, went a lot better. I had a really good
Hmm.
time. I didn't I didn't find myself falling into the same trap. It was the third prep that was the deadly one for me.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I think one of the key things, at least for me and everything I've done, is like it's all relative. And the sooner I realize that in whatever I'm doing, like I feel like I compare myself and I'm competitive with those around me in like a window, right? So like we're talking about bodybuilding, running, whatever it is, like I look at people within a window and and whatever I compete within that window, I'm okay with. So a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but like I know I'm
Right.
never gonna be at the next tier. Right. So it's like a
Right.
tier based thing. And so the sooner I do that, like I'm never gonna be the best in the world at anything. Right. Like it's just you would know at this age, like if we're gonna be those guys already. Like, I can't imagine the stress that's on those people. Um, but I think just keeping it relative, being competitive within the that block, then I'm happy. So like it's really funny because last year in the marathon, I exceeded my goal. My goal was originally like a 4-hour marathon, and then as I was training, I was like, okay, a 3:30 is possible, and I finished the marathon at 3:25. So I beat my goal by 5 minutes, and I felt great too, right? Like didn't hit a wall, wasn't beat up at the end of it, and I was like, okay, cool. Now I know next year I can run better. But the guy that won the marathon ran it in 2:25, beat me by a whole hour, right? And
Crazy.
like it's crazy because there were 16,000 people. I came in like 1100 place. I beat a lot of people. So if we're talking about comparison, right? In some ways, comparison is it keeps it gives you the bigger picture, like understand where you're really at. But I remember the guy that won, he was a major in the Marine Corps as well. And I just remember thinking, crap, I thought I ran pretty well. I was a leader of Marines. This dude is a leader of Marines, but a better runner than me. Like, I suck, you know? And then I was like, okay, well, I bet he can't bench 225. So that's where you kind of get you have to be better at something else. But yeah, I think it's just relative. Like, I'm never going to be that fast. And for me to get that fast, I would have to make sacrifices that I don't think are, that I just personally don't want to make that choice. And then there is probably a natural limit for certain people in anything you choose to do.
I think it's probably like a natural tendency to have, like what you mentioned. You come in like 1100th place out of 16,000. So like you
Mhm.
still ended up coming in like the top, what is that, like almost like the 8th percentile
Mhm.
or whatever that is. So like you're still top 10% basically. But then you're looking at the 1100 people that are ahead of you, and I think like it's a very human thing to look at the
Yeah.
people that are ahead and be like, geez Louise, that guy that was like an hour ahead of me. I
Yeah.
think that I think that's a normal feeling, but what really gets us is like the where it gets really unhelpful, I think, is when
Mhm.
we let it get us past a certain threshold. Like it leaves us actually feeling sad
Yeah.
that we
It's like a bell curve. Like, it's a good thing. And then once you start slip that slippery slope, it's negative. You lose confidence.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the I think the answer, the solution to not feeling sad or upset
Mhm.
about the people that do better. And I think it is okay to be upset if you're like, shoot, I could have done better, because I can push you to
Yeah.
actually do better. So like there's a balance. But I think what can help as a solution to not like to get too down on oneself
Mhm.
is to like be grateful for the things that are
Yeah.
going really well. Like what you noted, it's like, well, hey, that guy, he beat me by an hour in the marathon, but I can bench 225 for reps. He probably can't do that. But seriously,
Yeah.
like I think that's a big part of the solution, is like being grateful for the, or at least being able to recognize the strengths that you do
Yeah.
have, things that you've worked
And
really hard for.
it's really funny because I, for a long time, thought that I need to focus on my weaknesses. So we have like these leadership principles in the Marine Corps that we talk about, and it's like know yourself, seek self improvement. It's one of the like the leadership principles that we talk about. So I used to really try to do that. I have all these books that are using to hold my microphone up right now, right? Like 7 highly effective habits of people, strength and leadership, speed of trust, like all these things to work on my leadership skills and everything else, right? And lately, what I've been doing the last couple of years, really when I started focusing on fitness, is I just stopped all that and I basically just started focusing on what I was good at. And for me, it really helped my mental like space. Now, it's not to say we don't try to improve. I think we still need to try to improve. But when I was constantly focusing on things I struggled with and then constantly having L's over and over and over and never getting a win, it just beats you down. And so what I've trying to transition to now is knowing what I'm good at, investing in that, and then surrounding myself with people that are good at the things that I'm not good at. And I think that helps fill my cup every day. It helps me be energized as I approach the tasks, the work, whatever it is. And I know I'm good at X, Y, and Z. And if I want to improve on something, I'm going to pick what that is and I'm going to slowly improve on it. I'm not going to try to improve on a gambit of things. I'm just going to know, okay, hey, I'm really bad at, you know, deadlift. Okay, I'm just not going to work on that right now, right? But if I did want to work on it, I did it very slow, incrementally, and I'm not like I take it as okay. Like let's use squats as a good example. I sucked at squats, right? You remember how my squats were trash, right? And I said, okay, I'm going to try to actually focus on these, but I'm not going to compare myself to other people's squats. I'm not going to compare because I know I'm putting this in a box right now and I'm working on this. So it's okay if I do really lightweight because I'm working on this. I'm not going to let my ego get involved. And then it's like, okay, we take those blinders off, we take that box off, and now I'm good at squats again. I don't know if that makes sense, but just like how I approach it. But during that whole time, I was really good at bench press. So I'm also going to be hitting bench and loving it because it's going to keep me motivated, energized throughout just working out. It's like you have the good part, and then you had to work on that little bit of thing that you're struggling with, but kind of in a confined, safe space. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect logical sense. Like you have an understanding of what your strengths or what your perceived strengths and weaknesses are, and upon having an understanding of that, you can work on each of those strengths and weaknesses in a way that makes most sense for where you're at, what
Mhm.
your specific context is. And it's interesting you mentioned that like you found yourself like doing things where like you underperform and maybe you do that over and over again. It kind of beats you down.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the tough parts about like comparison being that like that's what they say, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
That's one of the big negative impacts it has is like it beats you down, leaves you feeling miserable, and then it ends up taking away a little bit from your ability to actually get better at the things that maybe you have the potential to get really good at, like bench press, for
Yeah.
example. So I feel like feeling crappy about squats all the time, and like that's what you think about in all of your workouts. It's like, I mean, like I'm doing really good with my lat pull downs and my bench press, but like whatever, like I suck at
Yeah.
squats. It's like you might be potentially taking away from your ability to bench press better because you're so focused on feeling miserable about squatting.
Mhm.
So that
I
makes, I mean, that
Yeah.
makes sense to me.
I also think owning it a little bit too, right? So kind of speaking out of both sides of my mouth here. On some points, when told people I was going for the 1,000 pound club, and I would tell them, "Oh, like I bench 315," and they're thinking, "Why are you struggling with the 1,000 pound club?" Like, you know. So it was kind of like a joke. Like, yeah, yeah, I'm great at squat, or I mean, great at bench press, decent at this, suck at squat. And they're like, "Wait, how can you squat the same as you bench press?" It's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, and you just kind of own that and just say, "Yeah, I just need to keep working on it." But not being afraid to talk about the things that your shortcomings or what you're bad at. And just being okay with that. And then if you actually want to make it, work on it. Then you just have to make that choice to do it and just have slow progress with it. Um, yeah. No, I think that's I love that. I love the saying, the comparison's the thief of joy. It totally is. And one thing I think, and tell me what your thoughts are on this, is like I'm wondering. Like, I don't think like, going back to your very first question, I don't think I really compare myself to others very much. I'm more compare myself to myself and what I think I kinda make the conscious decision if I'm going to let this thing bother me or not, or if I'm just gonna, "Okay, I'm gonna chalk that up to a loss." I'm no longer good at this. Moving on. Um, I think a lot of it, though, is just generally, are people confident in themselves as a person? Regardless of, like, fitness, finances, career, but are you just confident? And I think that's when you start creeping these comparisons in. When you're so concerned about other people, you're not concerned about your own life. Um, you're not prioritizing the people that you love, the people around you, your goals. You're focused outward instead of inward. Um, and I think, especially getting into bodybuilding now, and especially seeing some of the young guys get into bodybuilding who haven't maybe developed that mental toughness yet, I could see how that could really eat them away. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or you've seen that with just all the different shows you've done. Because me coming into bodybuilding in mid 30s, like, how I do is not going to define who I am as a person, or if I'm successful or not, or what I'm accomplishing. Because I already have other things that I've done to get here. But if you're 20 and you're doing it, you might could easily, hey, I'm going to go do a show, come in last place. Oh my goodness, I suck at everything. Like, that could easily be a downfall if you're comparing to others.
Yeah. I think that, and I know people that have that, not just competitors, but in general, people that are really into fitness that train really hard and like they vocalize to me that they're not happy with where they are despite all the work that they put into it. And they're constantly
Hmm.
comparing themselves to others and they're constantly feeling miserable about it. It's like, it's a pattern that I've definitely seen that when you fall into that, it just takes away from all the the good that a person has
Hmm.
accomplished. So for example, some of the people that I'm thinking of, they they honestly at least vocalize that they're miserable because they don't look a certain way, but I'm looking at them and I'm like, "You are honestly top 1% of North
Mhm.
Americans. You're lean, you have tone definition, great looking muscle bellies." It's like, yeah, maybe you're not like the best
Mhm.
natural bodybuilder in the world, but like the physique that you have is, even though you're not happy with where you are, it's actually what most other people
Mhm.
dream of having.
Yeah.
So I think that, yeah, I think that when you get so wrapped up in feeling miserable about where you are and wishing that you were like way ahead of the game or looking like someone else or just looking better than where you are, and you get so wrapped up on that, I think the problem is you become too inward thinking at that point.
Yeah.
You become too inward thinking. You become miserable because you're thinking too much about all the things that you don't like about yourself, and that takes away from everything else.
Yeah.
Have you seen that before too?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Definitely. I think with our music backgrounds
Oh,
and
yeah, man, there's a lot of that. We could, yeah. Go ahead.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. That just brought up
Yeah.
a whole lot of memories.
It triggered you a little bit.
Oh, it did.
Um,
Yeah.
and as you were thinking about, I was thinking about some of my music stuff, but really bodybuilding and music are very similar in the sense that so like a race or a baseball game or any of these things, there's objective winners and losers. So like you can view that through an objective lens and then you can look at what you need to do better. I missed so many free throws in the basketball game and that's why we lost or whatever. I think with bodybuilding and music, there are objective things internally that those who do them understand why someone does better than them or not. But at the end of the day, it's subjective. And that's very hard then for someone who's pouring their blood, sweat, and tears into it, and they played awesome, but then someone doesn't like think that as well. Like they don't get that confirmation from a third party or whatever. It like cripples them. And I think just having that balance of, hey, I improved from last time. I enjoyed how I sound. The audience enjoyed how I sound. There's only like these three judges that don't like it, and just kind of keeping that in perspective. At the end of the day, we made music, or at the end of the day, we showed off the art of the body and what I could, build. And so I think it's just hard when it's not objective and so many people need that like clear yes or no and definitive and like, why did I not do well? Show me. Well, sometimes that's not the answer. It just is what it is. Someone else thought you looked better. Like, sucks to suck. And then you just kind of like move on. But is there any specific thing like when I know I talked about the music, it kind of like you brought up some memories, but anything to kind of relate with that?
Oh man, that's my entire music background in a nutshell is that whole concept.
Yeah.
Thinking back, I remember like I've done recitals where I actually like they're looking back, they're really good. Like I played some pretty crazy repertoire,
Mhm.
and it wasn't perfect, but it was pretty impressive. But I remember like my fourth year undergrad recital, it was insane. Like it was so good, but like for the week after that recital, I was just thinking like, man, I made this mistake, and like no one in the audience even knew. But
Yeah.
it's like I made this mistake, and this mistake, and I was just like dwelled on that for like the next week.
Yeah.
And then as far as the comparison thing goes, always comparing. I mean, that's what,
Mhm.
like in music school, like I was always listening to the pros, like my
Yeah.
favorite orchestral players and soloists, and I was always trying to sound like them. And that I think it is actually a good thing
Yeah.
to do. You imitate to try to improve yourself, imitate someone that's better than you. But I was always on way past the line of just imitating and trying to get
Yeah.
better to like just being like, why do I suck so much? Because I don't sound like this person. It was like my ears were ahead of my skill level, my ability to play, and that just left me
Yeah.
unhappy. Honestly, if I could go back now, I'd probably be a much better bass trombonist, having figured that out much later on. I probably could
Yeah.
have had a much more enjoyable experience and sounded, I think I probably could have become a lot better from not getting in
Mhm.
my own way. Did you find that too? Like did you run into that?
Yeah, I think so. I probably gave up on my passion of music a little bit earlier than you. So I kind of came to terms with this is what it is. Those who can't do teach. So let me prepare to be a teacher, right? So I just kind of was okay with that. Um, I think you know, the one thing I remember though about music is we had like the juries. I don't know what they call them up there. Same thing where you just play for
Yeah,
the
we
the
could
students,
series.
and then we also had like trumpet ensemble, or and like we would have trumpet studio where we play for each other, and that was the worst. We would like destroy each other, and that was like part of the job. We had to like critique the others, and it just like made it not fun. Like the most fun I had in school was just getting with one of the other guys and just practicing for playing music just to play music. Um, so yeah, there was definitely a lot of that, and I remember distinctly there was a summer that I marched drum corps, and I dedicated the whole summer to music, and I came back, and I was probably the best trumpet player at that time, chop wise, and everything else. And they put together a trumpet ensemble to compete at the national trumpet competition, and they didn't ask me to play in it. And so, like objectively, I thought I was the best, and I didn't get to go, and they did really well that year, beat a lot of top schools. And so, like even though I wasn't really, I guess I was comparing myself to the other five that got picked. And then it's like, why didn't I get picked? And then you start giving yourself like excuses. Like I think it's probably because I wasn't like in. Like I think there's so many things like for the politics of it all. Like I wasn't fully committed to music, and so therefore maybe they're not going to pick me. But maybe it's I actually just sucked. Maybe they didn't like my sound, and I started making excuses. But if it really bothered me, I probably would have came back stronger and played more. But I just made that choice. Like for me, it wasn't worth it at that time to fully dive in to it. So yeah, I think so. The music community is one of those that's really bad, and especially even now when I'm getting gigs like out in town and stuff like that. Comparison is all. It's all it is, and it's not just on how you perform; it's how you present yourself just as an individual. Like, do you
Yeah.
show up on time? Are you professional? Do you respond to emails in time? Like, so you could get gigs just off of that comparison to someone else. Um, so it still is present to this day. Um, yeah, I don't know how we got off on the music tangent, but yeah, bringing back flashbacks. But talking about playing and how good we were, I definitely got worse every year of college. But I remember, 100%, dude. I got worse. I was like such a top prospect my freshman year. It just went
That's
downhill. They
funny.
were like, "What did we get here?" Um, but sometimes I think we need because we're so hard on ourselves and we're comparing ourselves to others. Like you're listening to the musicians, you're watching other bodybuilders. Sometimes, at least for me, we need that assurance from a third party. And like I remember there was an audition I had going to school, and my dad was standing outside the room, and of course, as my dad, he's always going to say good things, but he came out, and I could tell his face. He was shocked at how I sounded. Like I played awesome, performed the best I've ever done, and it just clicked. He's heard me practice it over and over, but never heard it like performed. And just seeing that like confirmation and knowing he's not just BSing me, like sometimes I needed that. So I think also with like a physique, like you're talking about your friends who's like you're in the top 1%. Like I think having that reality check, having someone be there for you, that it's got to be someone you trust. It's not going to be someone who just gasses you up just to gas you up. And I think that's why, like when I was doing my show, prepping, I was asking you and Brandon, and I think you guys were kind of like not really telling me, but like afterwards, you're like, yeah, like you're gonna be fine. It's like, okay, cool. I needed that.
Reassurance.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, you actually made me think of a couple things. Um, just as you were talking there, like going back to music, and I'll connect this to bodybuilding too, about how there's this danger of comparing yourself to other people, and it making you potentially miserable, turning you off from the thing that you're doing, like music, for example. Like eventually, like you just get so sick of it from comparing yourself to other people, or getting so much critique all the time, or like going to trumpet studio class or low brass class and just like
Yeah.
playing in front of your peers all the time, and like them, you go there and you get critiqued. That's what you're there for, not for compliments necessarily, just to
Hmm.
get critiqued. But there's a balance too, right? Because at the same time, that's what you're reminding me, is there is a balance. Some of this is really, really a good thing. Like you need comparison at the same time, like imitation. I'm just thinking about what I was saying about like I would try to imitate my favorite players, and that actually
Yeah.
helped me sound better. But the danger was not becoming envious of those players. Like, why don't I sound like that? Like I wish I was them. That's where it became problematic. But I think there's finding the balance is the tough part for a lot of
Yeah.
people. So like music, for example, not so comparing yourself to other people, imitating your favorite players is good because it can help you sound better, but it's tough not to cross over into just feeling upset about it, feeling
Yeah.
envious. And I think the same thing is true with bodybuilding, natural bodybuilding, fitness in general, as well as like how do we learn? We learn from other
Mhm.
people. We
Yeah.
learn from comparison. Like that's how human beings learn in general. So like I'm thinking about like bodybuilding. How did
Yeah.
I learn like the how did I learn to train with decent technique? It's like from watching people who are better than me or
Yeah.
being coached by, mentored by people that have amazing technique and learning from them. So you need that. And it's
Yeah.
like, how do you learn how to prep? Like, how do you learn to diet? Well, learn from the example of other people. At least that's how I learned. That's how I got pretty decent at it. I'm not the best in
Yeah.
the world, but like I look at people like Jeff, like my
Yep.
coach, like how does he do it? What is his thought process like? And I can take a lot of what he does and apply it to myself.
Yeah.
So I think that it's interesting that the tough part sometimes is finding the balance
Yeah.
between learning from other people, but not becoming envious of other people.
Yeah. And I also think learning from others helps you, like, you know, kind of like the old school of like find out the hard way and then you learn. But we're smart now. We have this experience in history. Like we can skip a lot of those roadblocks that would maybe stop us from continuing to do the thing. Like, because if you're learning the hard way, but you've learned the hard way so long that you now don't like it, maybe you do have a real true passion for it. Maybe you do have a talent in something, but if you can't get to that point, then what's the point, right? So, like, I think, like you're saying, listening to a coach, listening to a friend who's knowing, like, we don't have to do it the hard way, right? We've progressed. We can jumpstart, our progress in whatever we want to do. Um, and also one of the things I think specifically with like they're critiquing each other, and maybe this is even just in losing, and one of the benefits of comparing yourself almost to a fault, I think is like building that resilience, building
Oh
them
yeah.
the mental toughness. So like you said, like your third show, you're working super hard at it and went all in, and then you didn't perform your best, but then you came back, right? Like, and so the learning point there is not the stuff that you did to and you didn't do well. The learning point is really afterwards and how you learned from it, and then built stronger, because now you also have the mental toughness of comparing yourself to others, how you didn't do as well as you wanted, but it's okay. It didn't break you. And I think that's important. I think that's something a lot of people struggle with. I think a lot of times our society is really struggling with that. But in fitness too, I think you can just see when people compare themselves to others, then they get just defeated instead of overcoming it. I don't know if you've noticed that, like just that mental resilience and toughness.
Yeah, I think that's a super good point. At the end of the day, I think that might be one of the most important skills to have is mental resilience and knowing how to, even though it sucks, knowing how to take critique, constructive criticism when it comes at you
Mhm.
and failing and knowing how to come back. I think it's like if you look at any of the best, not just bodybuilders, but musicians,
Mhm.
athletes, like there's not a lot of them, some of them, but not a lot of them are like they don't, strike gold first try. A
Yeah.
lot of them fail over and over and over and over again and receive like so much critique over the years
Mhm.
before they end up becoming successful.
Yeah.
I think about
Yeah.
like you making me think about Jeff again. So my coach Jeff Alberts, like I think he legitimately did 20 shows before he won his pro card. Like he
Yeah.
won his pro card when he was in his late 30s after having competed like 20 times. It's insane. So it's like talk about learning from and not giving up
Yeah.
after failing over and over and over again. And I think that's actually one of the coolest traits. That's one of the traits that I actually admire the most from other people is having that mental resilience that you mentioned and being able to come back
Yeah.
after things not going the way that you want them to.
Well, because at the end of the day, I think that's the biggest thing that holds people back. When someone doesn't want to go to the gym or maybe struggles with, they didn't lose as much fat as they want or build as much muscle. I feel like 9 times out of 10, that is a mental thing. You know what I mean? They haven't hit their genetic limit yet. They haven't pushed their body hard enough. They're just mentally giving themselves up on themselves. They're mentally giving themselves excuses. They're looking at someone else and instead of saying, you know, that person just has better genetics than me, or that person is just has more muscle. Hey, why? Oh, because they're here every day grinding. I took 3 days off when after a long weekend or something. Like, and it's like excuses instead of self-reflection, taking a pause and saying, okay, do I really want this? I think we talked about this, like going all in, being a focused goal and whatever it is. And I think it's okay to not be good at everything. Like you have to make choices, like I kind of
Yeah.
gave up on the music thing because I decided, okay, for me to be at the level I want to be at, it's not going to be worth it. But like we've also discussed, fitness should be a non-negotiable. Fitness is the foundation. Like you have to go all in on fitness because longevity, lifestyle, you're going to be happier, all these great things. Um, so then you look at it like, okay, what am I doing? Am I making the decision am I going all in with this? And then did I do everything I need to do? Or am I giving myself excuses and then comparing myself to others? But then I'm not honest with myself about why, when they're there grinding every day and working it out and I'm not. I think it's huge.
Yeah, there's a couple of really, really awesome points in there, and one of them is like going back to something that you said earlier and what you said now about like understanding your own strengths and weaknesses. So understanding, like with music, for example, I'll speak for myself and say that
Mhm,
I was just not one of the. I didn't have a great natural proclivity for playing the trombone. Like I
mhm.
really, really struggled, and I knew people that were more naturally talented and gifted. And I don't think you have to be completely naturally talented and gifted to be an amazing musician, but it wasn't honestly, it was like it was not a, it wasn't a strength for me.
Yeah.
And I think if I recognized that, I think I could have maybe developed some more realistic expectations that could have helped me throughout the process and not feel miserable along the way comparing myself to people that were genuinely like prodigies basically.
Mhm, mhm.
So there's that. I think that's a variable to consider is understanding like maybe it's not a strength, something that you're working on, it's something that you're not naturally talented in. And I mean that doesn't mean that you can't get really good at it, but just understanding that that is the set of cards that you've been given and you should
Yeah,
work on it um, based off of what your potential is, like just understanding or having an idea of what your potential is. So that's one variable that I think is helpful to try to figure out for yourself, and that might make the process a little bit easier. And the other two is, and you made me think of this when you're talking, is to also be patient, right? So
mhm.
we're talking about people can give up along the way, right? They don't
Yeah.
get the result that they want in the weeks or months that they're hoping for. So it's like, oh, why bother? I'm gonna just fall off
Mhm.
the wagon. Instead of having more realistic expectations of just understanding like this is gonna take longer. This
Yeah.
might take a long time. So like with bodybuilding, for example, you want to look a certain way or you want to build a certain amount of muscle. You've only been working on it for a couple of months, maybe a couple of years for some people.
Mhm.
And and having an understanding that you might actually be able to build the amount of muscle that you want to build, but it might just take another 5 years of training, 10 years of training. And then the secret there is to like just not give up before then,
Yeah.
to keep going, um, and to develop the mental resilience that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It's a long man's game on so many things, and that's why they say consistency beats anything else. Doing it every day for 20 minutes is better than one day at an hour. Then you're not doing it for 4 days or whatever it is. Just like how the human body learns, how we learn skills, just doing it every day and then building the habit of it. I think is so important. And kind of flip gears, but with that, so what are your thoughts on comparison when it comes to today's age of social media And I think this kind of ties in with like instant gratification, right? We see a 30-second clip. We don't see the journey, the hour-long workout. We see the highlights of it, and we only see people at their best. And I want to see your thoughts about that. And then I kind of have a follow-up about only seeing people's best on Instagram. But what are your thoughts about just the clips of it and people just comparing themselves and just seeing the best of the best?
That's a really good question. I've been thinking of my like social media as almost, or my phone. I almost think of it as like an envy box. Like that's almost what it is, because like Instagram pushes uh things that it knows you're going to be interested in, which are oftentimes giving you a snapshot of people's lives that makes it look like they're having just like such an amazing time, or natural bodybuilders in my case, in our case probably,
Yeah.
showing like the most amazing physiques, guys working out that look absolutely phenomenal. And it's like I think of it as like an envy box or an envy trap, where that's the big danger with social media. It's so easy to look at pictures of natural bodybuilders, people's that, for me, like that are ahead of me, that I think have physiques that are more advanced. They're just more genetically gifted, or they're just better. They're further along the road than me. They're just better bodybuilders than me. And that's the danger, is to feel envious. And like you noted, you don't get to see their history, the years that they've put into it. Or in some cases, like, you don't get to see that a lot of these guys that you're seeing, they're not natural bodybuilders. They're
Yeah.
enhanced. They're
Yeah.
on vitamin S. And you don't get to see that either. You don't get much of an explanation. But the danger definitely is to get into the doom scrolling game, and then ultimately end up feeling kind of sad, feeling kind of
Hmm.
miserable, because you're not where all of these other people
Yeah.
are that have all these amazing posts. They got all these amazing physiques. So that's the
Yeah.
danger of it. There's positives too. That, like,
Yep.
positives being, well, you get to see what the potential for the natural bodybuilding game is like nowadays. You
Hmm.
get to see just how much potential some people have at building muscle, what's possible for some people. So that can be a good thing, because it can, I think, like for me, it sometimes it helps push me in a way that's healthy.
Yeah.
But the danger is to feel envious, to wish that I looked
Yeah.
more like
Not happy
them.
with
And
yourself as a person.
yeah, do you
Yeah.
find that? Do you find that too? Do you ever find yourself falling into that?
Um, Not envious of other people. Um, and I think I mitigate that by I follow the biggest one I scroll the most is I don't know what their actual name is. I think it's like Jim Fail Nation or something. Love
Yeah,
those guys.
they got some good memes, right?
Yeah, so
And
it's
funny
always the
clips.
funny stuff. So I'm
Yeah,
always
yeah,
like
that's cool.
I kinda I use like humor a lot. So
Yeah.
but I also do notice I also the most things I go down doom scrolling is like gym bro jokes or like failed nation stuff. That's one of them, and then the other one is like toxic work because I hate my job sometimes, like 95% of the time. So it'll be like, just all these memes about telling, all your coworkers are dumb or whatever, you hate your boss. And I think it's funny, and I'm kind of like using comedy to like cover up like, me being stressed out about it all. But I do notice myself like if I follow too many of those, then I actually instead of looking at like, "Hey, I'm gonna show up to work positive," I kind of actually fall into it like, "Yeah, this is actually all true. This is actually how it is." And 2 things can be true. Like, it can be a toxic place, but also you could also just go with a positive mental attitude, right? So I don't know, man. I don't really I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I'm new to the game a little bit, like, but I don't really find myself um envy of other physiques. I don't really go through and look. And maybe it's because we know, like, maybe they're enhanced or not. Maybe we don't know. And so it's like I kind of am skeptic about anything I see. So I take it all with a grain of salt. I think it's more impressive when I see someone at the gym and then putting up the work and seeing how they work out. And like most of the guys that are jacked that I actually respect, I see in the gym are doing like it controlled, doing some weird stuff with light weight. And so they're like doing it right because they're not ego lifting. They're not, I think even in your video today, you were talking about your triceps. You know what I mean? Like lightweight. So go check out Sam's video today. But like just very lightweight and controlled. So someone could see you and be like, oh my God, that guy's jacked. Why is he like, is he warming up? No, like he's doing it with proper technique and control, so it's more respectable. Um, so yeah, I haven't gotten down that trap. I don't know why.
I
Maybe
think that's
we're,
a good
we're
thing.
maybe
That's
we're a little
definitely.
bit maybe I'm a little too old. Maybe I missed that. And I think this is one thing I'm concerned about. I was talking about with the bodybuilding with the young guys. I think this is problematic with those younger generation. Let's call it 15 to 25-year-olds right now. It's like they just live off of the social media, and everything's got to be social media, and they're just not experiencing life. They're not going out there meeting people and just talking and like asking them how they do that lift, or hey, you have a great physique, how'd you get that? Instead they're going to be like, let me follow you on Instagram and I'll just follow your page about how to get a great physique. No, because they're not going to tell you the full truth. Like, we'll just go talk to them at the gym and ask them. So yeah, I don't know. Now I had a follow. I don't know. Like, so I have a follow up. um
Okay.
so you're a content creator. We follow a lot of content. What are your thoughts about, at least my perception is, a lot of content creators only put the best out there. And I've had this thought, and it bothers me because I think it's a problem for the reasons we just discussed. But why some content creators are not willing to go out there and show the failures, and show the realism of it all, and just be themselves. Like, is it partly the algorithm doesn't push that? Do people not want to show their vanity, they only want to show their best sides? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Has that been an experience that you've seen, or do you disagree, or what do you think?
Oh man, that's another really good question. Another really good topic. I'm trying to think of like the content that I put out. So, for example, when I put out content like on my Instagram stories, I'll
Mhm.
usually only put on like 20 seconds of a sweat set. And usually
Yeah.
it's like my best looking reps. It's like the
Mhm.
ideal, basically, of like
Yeah.
what I try to make my reps look like. But oftentimes you don't get to see the very end of the set where technique sometimes does get a little bit gray.
Mhm.
And then on my other YouTube videos that go through my whole workouts, it'll show the entire set. At least 70% of the time it will.
Yeah.
And you'll get to see when the technique gets a little bit grayer. But in the instance of Instagram, I'm just speaking for myself, the stuff
Mhm.
that I put out, I put the best looking reps for two
Mhm.
reasons. So one is because I want to show the ideal of like what I
Yep.
want the reps to look like and what I think is a good thing to strive for. But
Mhm.
then to be perfectly honest, the reason that I wouldn't show some of the gray looking reps, the reps at the end of a set sometimes where technique isn't 100%, it's
Yeah.
85% there. So it doesn't look the same. Part of it is from being self-conscious about it,
Mhm.
like being
Mhm. Mhm.
completely real about it is it's ego. Like I don't want to
Yeah.
show that I'm not perfect all the time. My reps aren't perfect all the time. So yeah, I think part of that, like for me as someone that does put out a decent amount of content, to be perfectly honest,
Mhm.
like there's two parts to it. One is I want to show the ideal, but
Mhm.
also part of it is ego, like not
Yeah,
wanting to
yeah.
show where things aren't perfect.
Yeah.
And it's tough to know when is the appropriate time to, because some people do,
Mhm.
they'll be really open and they'll show like, hey, this is what happened today. It didn't look good. It wasn't
Yeah.
perfect. And
Yeah.
that can be that I can see how that is super appealing.
Mhm. Maybe
Uh,
there's a difference between, like, your channel, which is a very educational, like, and, you know, very coaching, like, "Hey, this is how we're gonna do this is the workouts I'm doing, these are the proper form," and stuff like that. So you want it to be like, you wouldn't want an educational video to be wrong, right? That doesn't make sense. But maybe the responsibility then flips for someone who's more of like an influencer, right? You see the influencer out there, and I still think there's a lot of vanity with them. And it's like they're not showing proper technique. So, like, let's show an actual workout of what you actually are doing, kind of like a day in the life. Like, I don't know. It's just interesting. I think that's one thing I kind of, going back to the very first question about the Instagram stuff and the stories. And like, It's kind of why I don't really trust it or care about it either way because I know it's not real. And until I
Yeah.
find someone who I think is real, then I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'll watch this a little bit more and I'll be invested in it because there's no BS in it actually how it is. But I do think I know at least I don't think that the algorithm pushes that either though. And I don't think people are interested in that. So it's probably like a nature of the beast. So someone who's an influencer super famous, if they change to just being how they really are, they're probably not going to be famous very, very long. And so, what's the cost benefit analysis of they can reach more people with a positive message? That's 80% instead of the whole 100 that doesn't reach anyone, kind of thing.
Yeah, you're probably right on that. It's like sometimes you see influencers, they'll post like the food that they're eating, like, hey, I'm like eating cheeseburgers and pizza and stuff. I actually can't think of an instance, but I can imagine this happening where they're like, hey,
Hmm.
look at what I'm eating today, burgers and pizza, and then you see like they're totally shredded out of their mind.
Yeah,
And so you're getting that little snapshot of the junk that they're eating that day. But what you don't know is that's actually the only meal they're
like
eating
3 days.
today. Yeah,
Yeah,
and then they're gonna fast for the next
yeah,
day,
yeah,
right? And it's like that, but you only, to your point, like, you only get to see a snapshot of what their life is. You don't get to see all the other stuff.
hmm,
You just make an you just infer, you come to some conclusion based off a little tiny
yeah,
snippet of their life, and it can be really tough to navigate. That is one of the challenges with
yeah.
social media for sure.
But
Definitely.
it can also be inspiring though. And so, like in my personal example, um, I think I have inspired multiple friends, and I'll just call them friends because it's mainly like through Facebook or friends that are following my Instagram, not random people. Um, but I think it's because they've known me for so long and I post so much about just like my daily grind. I'm very transparent and open with it. So through that time, they've built that trust and then they can reach out to me and they know that like I'm giving them the honest answer. That takes we talked about this in the past. That just takes so much time to develop and it's not scalable. You know what I mean? It's very small, like in the sense of how many people I can reach and impact. Um, but I think for me, at least when it is, it's worth it though because you know it's hitting home. It's not just a random follower or something like that, and truly inspiring for people because they can see the grind and the sweat and everything else that you've been doing the whole time. You know, I was just thinking back because like I'm starting marathon prep on Monday, and I was looking back at some of my stories because it's just funny. You can see my content change from when I was first doing the fat loss. It was just me like talking to the camera, and then it switched to like me doing technique stuff. And then during the marathon last year, it was all just me talking to the camera after my runs and posting my run times and stuff. And it's just funny. I was watching some of them, and I'm like, supposed to do a 16-mile run today. Stopped at 12. I suck. You know what I mean? Then I would like explain why. Like, obviously not great for content, but but it was just being honest with it. Like, hey, failed multiple times on the plans, and just throwing it out there and being honest with it and open and just learning from it. I think is important. But
In the bigger picture, I think that those are the most interesting stories to follow are people that show imperfection and growth, like starting from a place of maybe not being very good when you first start out or whatever you're starting out
mhm.
with, and then seeing improvement. The process isn't perfect. It's almost like an underdog story. And then,
Yeah,
you end up getting good at something. And those are some of the best stories when you can follow someone's growth and you get to see the imperfect stuff
yeah,
along the way. It makes it more real,
yeah,
which is, I think that's a big part of what you're saying.
yeah. I think the
But yeah,
key to that is being consistent enough with, like, posting it in a short enough span of time that will keep people's interest, but still move the story along. So
yeah,
that's the difficult part on, like, the content creators side of things. But,
yeah.
so we talked a lot about the negative of comparison. What are some of the positives you think, if any, with comparison?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's how we learn. So
Mhm.
at the same, like, there's the danger of crossing over a threshold to becoming miserable from being envious from comparing yourself to others. But at the same time, I think It's a really good way of learning. You look at someone
Yeah.
else that's ahead of you, they've got more experience, they do something better, so you try to imitate them, or you get to know them, you ask them questions, they let you know what they're doing that is better
Mhm.
than what you're doing, you try to copy it, or you try to borrow it, or however you wanna look at it. But I
Yeah.
think that is, at the end of the day, that's one of the best ways to learn, if not the best way to learn, is to learn from other people.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm trying to think personal examples. I again, like, just going back to, like, having a mentor or a coach,
Mhm.
like a physique coach, a bodybuilding coach, or a fitness coach. I think about the people that I've learned from. When I first started lifting weights, for example, I had a book. I had the new Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding, that old
Nice.
Schwarzenegger book. It's like that thick. It's like it's very thick, and it's got a list of exercises in there. And then I just try to imitate it in the gym, do a terrible job. But I remember there's this. I can't remember if I told you this, but there's this guy that used to train at the same time as me. His name was Gord, and I was a teenager at the time. I was like up at the crack of dawn basically to get in to do like a workout that was way too long before classes started in high school. And this guy was like super, super nice to me
Yeah.
and would do his best to every now and again. He'd come over and he'd be like, "Hey, can I give you some advice?" And he'd always ask,
Yeah.
"Can I give you some advice?" Like, I'd be like, "Yeah." And then he'd really nicely be like, "You can do it better if you do it like this." So, like, this
Yeah.
guy's way ahead of me. I was comparing myself to him because I thought he was like Hercules at the time. This guy's super
Mhm.
jacked. In retrospect, I don't know how jacked he actually was. It's like, when you're younger and you're smaller,
Yeah,
you
it's
think
all
you're one.
relative.
Yeah,
Yep.
but I thought this guy was like Hercules, and I remember thinking, I watched this guy squat plate upon plate in the barbell, and I remember thinking, man, this guy is strong, and he's deadlifting plate, a barbell full of plates. At least that's how I remember it.
Mhm.
And so I was comparing myself to him for sure. I was like, man, I want to be as strong as that guy.
Yeah.
And I actually think I learned a lot from him. I learned because he actually gave me advice. He was really nice to me. So is that, and I got to watch him train, and I think I took, even when he didn't give me some kind of advice or instruction, I could watch him and then try to do things that he was doing. It wasn't always perfect, but it
Yeah.
was a start. And also, on a side note, I'm just thinking too, the guy was so humble. Like,
Yeah.
the way he
Yeah.
would come up and ask to give like a 15, 16, 17-year-old, however old I was, to like, you come up, hey, and I remember he kind of talked quiet and slow like this. He's like, "Hey, would you mind if can I give you some advice on that?" Man, he's
Yeah.
so humble, so much humility. That's something that I think that I really liked about him, and maybe that rubbed off on me too. Maybe, I was a kid, so my ego is
Yeah.
probably too big, but later on, I think, thinking back, that maybe that rubbed off on me. I hope it rubbed
Mhm.
off on me a little bit, but
Well,
yeah, having those kind
yeah.
of people to look up to and imitate, and maybe if you're lucky, they'll give you some advice, or if you like actually have a mentor or coach that is
Mhm.
there often for you, they're there for the purpose of giving you advice.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the best ways to learn.
Well, I think it's
What do you
interesting.
think?
Yeah, because I definitely agree, and I think we've talked about this in the past. It's such a, um, misconception that, like, people at the gym are scarier and all this other stuff. Like, I guarantee you ask any jacked person in the gym for advice, they will talk your ear off on it. So, like, be careful what you ask for. So if you go over and say,
Yeah.
"Hey, how do you bench so much? Can you talk about, like, the difference of the technique? I heard something about planting my feet or not." Oh my god, like, you know what I mean? Oh, like, you
You're like,
wanna
"Let
learn,
let me
get
tell you."
ready. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think, you know, asking questions, they will always help you out. They just want, because like we've talked about, someone who's fit just wants to see other people get fit because they know that fitness is important. I also think you talked about it's the best way to learn. I think you just have to have the desire to learn too. Because even if you don't want to ask them, or even if they don't tell you, don't just go to the gym. I mean, if you're gonna be at the gym getting your workout in, it's not that hard to look around also and just use your critical thinking brain that makes us different than animals. And like, well, I guess we are animals, but whatever. But like, you can see it and be like, wait, are they doing something different than what I'm doing? Because that person's jacked. So let me wonder, maybe I'll try it that way. Oh yeah, I feel it, right? We've talked about recording ourselves, right? Not for vanity reasons, but for improvement and just like self-improvement as well. Like, I think so many people just go in and they just through the motions. It's like we have to critically think about what we're doing and have a purpose and a goal. And if you just want to go through your emotions, like, hey, any fitness is better than no fitness, but we're not optimizing our time, we're just wasting it. And so pay attention to what other people are doing. If you don't have to take everything, but just be aware so that you can at least consciously make a decision versus just going with the flow. I think it's
Those
huge.
are really good points. Do you
Yeah.
find that, like, if someone like, just imagining, or if this has happened, do you find that if someone were to come up to you and ask you for advice, wouldn't that do you find that to
Make
be,
my
like, a
day.
huge compliment? Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm jacked enough to like give advice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I go to people all the time. So recently there was someone doing so I love barbell skull crushers. I think it's one of my better lifts, but I also do like I used to do it like this and then we talked about going I go back. The only thing I'm sometimes worried about is I do more like this rotation and not all triceps, but whatever. I like how it feels. But I saw a guy doing he was like sitting and doing that like but on the sitting shoulder thing. But he needed my help putting it up there. And I was just asking him like how's that hit? Like, why do you do it that way versus like laying down and stuff? And then the weirdest one I saw yesterday or 2 days ago, it was on the hack squat machine, right? But at these like commercial gyms, they're not the best. Um he was facing it the other way. Like he had his shoulders in it and he was basically doing RDLs with it. And it looked like his knees were about to snap, right? The way he was doing it. I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't trust this at all. Didn't have a lot of weight on it. And I walked up to him, I was like, what's that hitting? He's like, oh yeah, my hamstrings. I'm like, oh, it looks like an RDL though, kind of. He's like, yeah, that's basically what it is. I just do it on this. Now I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm gonna have to try that. He's like, yeah, yeah. And you're just talking. So I was like, oh, cool. So I think just having that confidence to go up there and ask people, you know,
Yeah. Yeah,
what it's
definitely.
doing. No one, they don't care. They're like, yeah, I'll tell you. They know it looks weird if they're doing something weird. um, so, yeah, I think that's huge on the comparison. Also, I think we were talking about this a little bit before we went live. I think comparison also, like on a positive aspect, keeps you understanding where you actually relatively are, and it's not as bad as you think. If you're in the gym, number one, you're already way ahead of so many other people. Like you're saying, North America, like your client or whatever is like already in the top, 10% or 5%, whatever. Like, but just stepping in the gym, like I don't even know what percentage you probably are, but you're above a lot. Um, and just because you're always going to look at the jack guys, your social media is always going to be the really in shape dudes, and that's fine. You should strive for that. That's great. But again, we're relative and we're thinking about what boxes we're in. If you're brand new to fitness, you are not in these upper levels. That's okay. You're in these tiers. Let's compare ourselves in here and then make little wins in these tiers, and then you go up to the next level. So, if you go in there and you can only squat the bar, okay, you can do the bar for 10 reps. You know how many people can't squat? You know how many people can't get up and even walk to the gym without a walker? Like, there's all these things. So I think people are way too hard on themselves in general. It ain't that serious. Like, let's just like it's positive vibes, positive energy, not negative energy. So I don't know if you've experienced that, you've seen that with people like self-doubt themselves, but hey, it's actually not that bad.
Yeah, I think yeah, it's one of the best cures is to, like, take a step back and look at things from a l larger perspective, basically.
Mhm.
Like you note, it's like I think the statistic is something like 74%, 73, 74% of North Americans or Americans, I can't remember if it's North Americans or Americans, are overweight or obese.
Yeah.
So, if you're either just at a healthy body fat percentage or you're working to get out of being in that bracket, then you're already doing really, really well. And
Yeah.
I think it helps, just like you noted, to shift your perspective if ever you're finding that you're feeling, unhappy with you where you are. Just take a step
Yeah.
back, look at things from a greater yeah, just a bigger perspective, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that's right on the money.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. No, I totally agree. Yeah, and I think it's awesome. I think I guess kind of if you had any other big kind of comparison epiphanies or stories, or who are you comparing yourself to now? Anyone? Are you for a positive or negative?
Oh man, who am I comparing myself to now? Well, it's funny because I feel like the comparing I do now is mostly on how to it's a learning thing. It's
Hmm.
mostly like looking at my favorite natural bodybuilders and looking at exactly how they pose. So like
Yeah.
I wanna make my delts pop out more with my front relaxed pose, and I wanna make my back pop out. I wanna showcase more of my traps, but also keep my lats flared with my back
Mhm.
poses. So a lot of the comparing I do nowadays for with natural bodybuilders is looking at like the nuanced
Mhm.
setups to how they pose so that I can try to imitate
Yeah.
certain things to figure out how I can make that work with my physique. And
Interesting.
it's tough because, you know, what could work really well for someone else might not work for me because my limbs could be longer, my torso could be longer or shorter,
Yeah.
so on and so forth. Like we just have different genetic frames and different muscle belly sizes and shapes. But
Mhm.
that tends to be like just thinking now, that would be probably where I find myself comparing myself to other natural bodybuilders um the most. I'm trying to think if like
Yeah.
even training nowadays there's been people that I've looked up to in the past at like looked to find what the ideal training style is, like what's the ideal training technique to maximize
Mhm.
muscle growth and make sure I don't injure myself. Like I've had people like that for sure.
Yeah.
I haven't as much because I feel like I learned a lot from them and I've got a really good groove. So I'm less focused on that now, but I have been in the past. It's mostly like
Yeah.
posing stuff now. But I think that, you know, after my third prep, that was where I learned a lot of lessons from that about
Mhm.
how to
Mhm.
not take it into the negative realm, how to not cross over to that threshold and feel miserable from comparing. And that just, it was kind of a, I think that was an experience that helped me
Yeah.
to learn more from comparison rather than to beat myself up over it. What about you? Or do
So yeah,
you
I
feel
loved your point about opposing. That's something I think I definitely need to improve, and I think that's a positive comparison because I have no idea what I'm doing there. And a post came across the other day about like the art of bodybuilding, and it was a posing routine that was actually really cool. I was like, man, I could like actually practice and like make this an art and like a dance kind of, and like, and I think I know we have talked about how like that's kind of like hokey a little bit and stuff. But like if you get a great physique, I could get on board with that if I knew how to do it and make it look good. Um,
yeah, can make it
yeah, like
epic.
yeah, you know what I mean? Play some cool music, especially the band music that we love,
Heck yeah.
some Hans Zimmer or something. Who knows, right?
Oh,
But okay.
definitely.
Yeah. So I think that will come along. I think there's three things I think I'm comparing to right now. Okay, so most importantly is myself, which I think is a good comparison. I think it's a positive. It is the most stressful one though, because I know I can do better, so I'm putting pressure on myself. And this is both for marathon and bodybuilding and just everything, which I think is why I'm struggling. Not struggling. I right now I'm in this uncomfortable zone area right now because, like we talked about last week, I'm at the heaviest weight at this body fat. I think you brought up a good point. Like you're your strongest and leanest at this weight. But again, I'm comparing what I look like. I'm comparing where I was at last year during my marathon prep. I was lighter, but I'm running faster right now. So it's a give and take. So that's okay. I think for the running, I'm not really comparing myself to anyone else right now, but what I have noticed, so a lot of people at work are doing the half marathon and some of them are doing the full. Some of them have started their training already. I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'm starting mine in July. It still gives me 16 weeks. They must be doing like a 20-week prep or something. And listening to them and their plans, I'm not trying to judge, but I'm just like, okay, the proof is going to be in the pudding. At the end of the day. Now, again, everyone's at a different ability level, but it's like I'm finding myself comparing not the results but the plans. Like, okay, so what's your
Hmm,
running plan? Like, okay, so you're running 4 miles every day. Like, what pace? Are you doing any tempo work? Are you doing hills? Are you doing
interesting.
repeats? So like, because it makes me wonder. But then I'm gonna outperform them. I just know I am, regardless. But I'm starting to. critique and compare the plans. It almost, in the bodybuilding sense, it would be like, hey, are you doing a push pull legs? Are you doing an upper lower full body? I'm comparing the method that we're getting there. So I think,
Interesting.
yeah,
Would
yeah,
you
and
say
it's
that's a would you say that that is a like, do you look at that as a positive thing, or do you look at that, from a negative angle?
I think it's an inquisitive thing.
So it's just
And
curiosity?
yes, and I think a little bit of competitiveness because I want to know when I beat you, was it because your training plan sucked? Did I outwork you? Like, because, and I just wonder how much people have actually done research. You know, um, like there's some pretty good science about running at a slow tempo in zone two, and there's some guys that every run they do, they're running like at a decent pace. And I'm like, when do you ever do your recovery runs? They're like, recovery runs. What are you talking about? I'm like, oh, amateur, right? Like that's what I'm thinking. So I'm more comparing the plan, and then I think at the end of the day, I'm going to use that as a justification of why I did better than them. So it's maybe a little bit of negativity, competitiveness towards the back
I
end.
can Yeah, that's interesting. I can relate to that in a couple of different situations. You brought
Yeah.
back some memories of music school again. Jeez
Yeah.
Louise. It I used to compare my practice routine with other people's practice routine. So like how people would prepare for their recitals or their mock
Hmm.
jury or their mock auditions or their juries or whatever, the orchestra concerts. Um, I used to compare myself to other people. Like that guy's only practicing for like an hour and a half, 2 hours a day. And like sometimes he takes a day off. Like, oh man.
Right.
And then I look at me and I'm like practicing like 6 hours a day, like no days off ever. And then I'm upset after because they beat me at the audition. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a negative angle to that. And
Yeah.
I was stubborn. I could have learned from that. Like, man, maybe I should have like taken a step back and been like, man, maybe you should like learn how to be more efficient with your practice. You don't need to practice for 6 hours a
Yeah.
day. You can be more
Yeah.
efficient practicing 2 hours or an hour and a half.
For
Um,
sure.
but yeah, that's a negative one for me. I wish I could go
Yeah.
back on that one. And then nowadays, I do find myself wondering, like with the natural bodybuilding thing, genuine curiosity as to like how other people are prepping. What are
Hmm.
their prep processes? And part of that is learning, like
Yeah.
how do people periodize the way that they diet, and like how do they structure their meals. That's actually
Hmm.
like doing episodes with this
Yeah.
podcast with other natural bodybuilders. I really like asking those questions out of a place of genuine curiosity to know how people accomplish what they accomplish.
Hmm. Which I think
I
is
think
cool
that's more
because
of a
there's different
positive.
ways. Yeah, there's different ways to skin a cat, right? There's different ways to get. There's no right or wrong answers, and
And
different
yeah,
body types. Yeah.
yeah, that's such a good point. Is you could have two different people that both end up looking absolutely amazing, but they have
Hmm.
different approaches. And then there's a learning experience from that, which is you can get an amazing result from taking different approaches. Sometimes
Yeah.
they're very different. Sometimes the approaches are there's just some little differences, but either way, there's differences to the approach.
And
And I think there's things to learn from
yeah,
that.
and I think
Interesting.
I think you can get really good at most things in a lot of different ways, right? It might not be as optimal. You might have to work a little bit harder. Maybe it's specific towards you. And I think when you look at like the experts in a field and they've came like you look at these world class athletes or musicians or whatever, and they give advice, we should listen, right? Because they've built the credibility, but it's not the way, it's a way. You know what I mean? And you take it, you learn from it, and maybe 9 out of 10 of those things work for you, but that 10th one is just not it. So we're not going to do that one.
Yeah.
And starting to listen to your body, understand what works for you, but no, don't just dismiss it because I can do it my own way. Well, like we were saying earlier, there's a smart way. There's a reason why. There's probably some science behind this. There's anecdotal evidence about why like they didn't get to being the fastest runner ever or the best bodybuilder ever without doing these certain things to hit the muscles a certain way. Like maybe we should try that. And then we do tweaks from there. Um
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a
So
really, really good point. Yeah, it's like because there
yeah.
can be a temptation to sometimes to take a look at what someone else is doing that's absolutely amazing. So like the best
Mhm.
natural bodybuilder in the world, for example, it's like, okay, I'm going to copy their training split and their
Yeah.
diet approach verbatim.
Yeah.
And maybe it could be the case that you just don't get the same result as them either. Maybe
Yeah.
it doesn't click with your personality and you don't get the same result as them. So it might not work. You can take some things from them, but maybe not everything works. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking of you and I for as examples too. You and I have different personalities. We
I was
have different
about to say I
preferences.
compare myself to you all the time too.
Well, we have different personalities and we have different training styles to some
Yeah.
extent. Like the same big principles are in place. Like we want to build muscle, so we expose our muscles to higher amounts of mechanical tension, but we have different preferences to what our training splits are and what
Mhm.
volumes we like to train with and what our training frequency is. And part of that is personality. The mechanism that drives for muscle growth is similar, and maybe there's
Mhm.
some physiological differences. Like maybe your muscles respond better to some different slight differences to how you train versus my muscles might respond slightly better to other things, but it's very
Yeah.
tough to know that kind of thing. But I think the biggest thing is like differences in personality can lead to um, different processes being more appropriate or more effective for one person versus the other. So yeah, you and I,
Yeah.
we've got different personalities, we've got different things that work for us, and we both built a good amount of muscles. So I think that
Yeah.
they're
Well, I will
both
say I
processes that
still
work.
always it's always a joke now with me and my workout buddy Kevin. Whenever we do something, I'm like, is this gonna meet Sam's technique standard? Um, and I always will so today I went a little bit lighter on some things and I was like, I'm just going a little bit lighter so I can actually get good technique. Like it's kind of like a joke that I do, right? And I'm like, is that just an excuse because I'm not feeling it today? But like, or is it? But there's some truth to it because I know. But it's okay to be conscious about it. I think because of my different personality, like I watch your tutorials and stuff like that, and your technique is like right, like perfect. And like, okay, I'm not doing any reps like that. Maybe a couple like exercises, but I'm doing that consciously, right? Like I'm knowing because I think, like you said, there's a little bit different, maybe for me, how my body responds, but also mentally. Like
Yeah,
whatever's working for me to keep me motivated going to the gym, maybe it's not optimal, but I make up for it with like how crazy I work out. You know what I mean? Um, but it's always in my brain, like, okay, hey, I'm gonna lock in at least like the first two sets. I'm gonna try to have really good technique, and then the third set, let's just whatever. Like, it's this weird, like, always battling with myself, like, okay, my technique's gonna be trash. Or I tell my friend, like, hey, let me know when my technique starts suffering,
yeah,
whatever. But it's really hard for me mentally to do good technique with lightweight. I think maybe because I'm still relatively newish in the lifting game, it's like the ego hasn't been subdued yet. I still like the pump. I like getting the big weights, and seeing it move up frustrates me when I don't move up. Because I also think I know I can push harder. I know I can push
yep,
more.
yeah.
So it's a balance.
Well, it's definitely interesting. At the end of the day, what drives for muscle growth is mechanical tension. And technically, you don't need perfect technique
Mhm.
to expose your muscles to higher amounts of mechanical tension. And even people that strive for perfect technique all the time, like let's say that your goal is to go into a training session and you're going to train perfect for every single rep, like that's also not a good thing, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Because if that's the case, then you're never gonna push your limits. Because if you're pushing
Yeah.
your limits, there's always gonna be a point where a technique gets a little bit gray at some point, at least a little bit. Maybe it goes from 100% to 90% or even to 80% or even 75%. My goodness.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like it's a spectrum, right? Like you can be so far on the good technique end of the spectrum that it actually holds back progress. You can't actually push your limits if you're training with perfect technique all the time. But then the other end of the spectrum is like you're so lackadaisical that like you're just like injuring
Yeah.
yourself all the time. It's like I think there actually is like you can learn from both ends of the spectrum, try to find the happy medium, maybe
Yeah.
a little bit closer to the good technique end just to make sure that you survive, like your all your joints like
Yeah.
stay in place. But yeah, it's definitely interesting, and it makes it tough, like the whole comparison concept that we're
Mhm.
talking about. The internet can make things confusing too, because you'll get different advice from educators, influencers, coaches on online, on YouTube, on Instagram, about like how perfect your technique needs to be, what good technique looks like,
Yeah.
has to look like. And sometimes it's not all of it is seems to be true, and it's more of an
Yeah.
opinion than a fact. And sometimes it's tough to navigate that kind of thing. But
Yeah. Well, there's that the whole thing about like science based versus like a gym bro. Then you're saying you don't know who's enhanced and who's not. And you know, that's why it's so important to reach out to people in person at gyms, like so you can see them and know them and they can talk to you like an honest person and say, yeah, this is what works for me and what doesn't and stuff like that. Um,
yep,
you know, I
definitely.
think I think the last thing I usually compare myself to, um, and there's really no objective way, is my drive. I compare myself to other people's drive all the time. And like I look at some people in the gym or on their running, and so many people talking about mental toughness just give up on themselves. And that's one thing that I think I am good at. And I compare myself to others, and like so many people just give up on themselves. So like we have to run like a Marine Corps PFT before June 30th, and it's our like the pull ups, the planks, and the 3 mile run. I already ran it, got a good score. A month later, I ran it again. I improved by 6 seconds, and I'm running one on June 30th, Monday. Even though I don't have to, because I want to do better. I'm just going to improve. You know, and some people are just like, "Wow, you already ran one." And 3 years ago, I would never have done that. I would have been like, "Yeah, I checked the box. I did it. Why do I need to do another one?" But I figured something out now. It's like because I want to improve, you know, and just so like the mental toughness to do that and go out there and continue trying to drive. I will just outwork other people. Specifically for fitness stuff, I'm kind of struggling with actual work, so I don't really outwork people with work. But you know, just like overall being a good dude, a good husband, a good man. I think I compare myself a lot. Like ultimately, I mean, we talked about fitness a lot. The biggest thing I compare myself is being like a good husband, a good person, a good man, and um, that is probably the biggest thing I compare myself to others. Um,
Those are like the arguably the most important things to care
mhm,
about and to improve on.
yeah, but fitness is a huge part of that. How can you
Yeah.
be a good, you know, protector, provider if you're not physically fit and all that other stuff? So
Yeah. I think those are the that trait to never give up and to keep trying to improve and to pick yourself up after failing, after losing, just to not quit. That's like that might be the one, if it's not the most, it's one of the traits that I admire the most that
mhm,
people have. It's just like the
yeah.
no quit.
Well, and it's like, you know, I had that goal to run 18 minutes by June 30th. I'm going to fail that, right? But because I knew I wasn't going to get there in time, I didn't use that though as just giving up. I've still been working on it, right? So it's like I've still improved, and that's okay. And that's like my first big failure I've had in a while, where I didn't meet one of my goals that I published out there. But at least I can say, okay, yep, I didn't meet it. I know why. I know what to improve in the future. But I just didn't run it one time and stop. I kept improving until the end of that deadline to see what I can actually get. So
Right.
come Monday, I'm going to run it, and I'm going to shoot for like a 1930, which is the last one I ran a 1948. So like that would be a huge improvement of 18 seconds. But any improvement, if I run a 1947, I'll be happy because it's improvement. So um,
Improving is it's kind of addicting, isn't it?
yeah, it is. It's really freaking hard. Progressive overload is freaking hard
But
with
it's
that.
so rewarding. That's why it's
Yes,
addicting, I think. It's like just so rewarding.
but there's that point. I think in your video today, you said you finally hit one after 12 reps or 13 reps after like weeks or something of this. It's like I just mentally
Patience.
can't. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like playing that
Yeah.
measure over and over and over, like going a little bit faster and faster and faster. I mean, it works, but it is painful.
Yeah.
That's why the
You know,
newbie gains are so awesome because you just make so much progress so fast.
yeah. But you know, it's funny because the newbie gains, they almost set up an unrealistic expectation right away, because then you're just like, well, I should be making this kind of progress all the time. But then it just like starts to get slower from there. You just
Yeah.
made me think back to like, so I'm really happy with the physique that I've built over the years. I don't think I'm done. I still think I have
Mhm.
lots more as far as like how much more muscle I can build, and I have a lot more room for growth and improvement. But I'm pretty happy with where I'm at right now. And thinking back to when I was like 20, my first couple of years in college, the physique that I really wanted when I was 20, I've got now. It took
Nice.
it took like 13 years
Yeah.
before I actually got the physique I really wanted. So it took like,
Mhm.
it just takes time. But then
But
in
is
combination with what
oh,
you mentioned earlier, which is like, just don't like, have mental resilience, don't quit, don't give up, and then just be patient. It just takes
yeah.
time.
But I'm guessing too, the physique that when you were 20 and you wanted, you have it, but now you want a different physique because you wanna continue improving, right?
Yeah.
And I think it
Yeah.
kinda goes back to our last conversation where I think the most important part is not the physique at the end of the day, it's the journey that you've
Yep.
learned throughout and all the positives you've discovered about yourself, the people you've impacted, right? I think that is, you look at it, the real progress and stuff that really matters,
Oh man, you're right on the money with that. I wouldn't have met you if I didn't keep going with the like
right?
going into the whole. Yeah, we wouldn't have met. We wouldn't have
Yeah.
met if
I
if I
wouldn't have
wasn't.
done learned all my technique. Dude, I tell you, in those videos that you were doing, I learned so much. I basically incorporated all that, in that year that, I kind of got in shape and built muscle. I just did whatever you said. Basically, all the questions I would ask, I would like word it as like hypothetically for people and be like, no,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
like Zach needs to know.
A
You
friend is
know?
wondering. Yes,
Yeah.
hypothetically.
Yeah, exactly. And you're
That's
like, wait,
good.
didn't you ask this question last time? But yeah,
No, that's awesome.
yeah, it's cool. Awesome.
Anyhow, what do you think? Do you
Yeah.
think we covered a lot?
Yeah, I think it was
Is there
good.
is
I think it was good.
and do you feel like we missed anything? Is there any other subtopics you want to dive into?
No, I mean, maybe for a different day, we could talk all about the bigger picture philosophical comparison and of men and stuff like that. But that's deep. Like,
Oh man, I'm up
yeah,
for that.
yeah, yeah. So
Cool. No,
be
I
a
think
good
this
one.
has been I think we covered a lot. I think this has been a good one.
Yep, for sure.
Cool. Well, thank you to everyone who has watched our conversation. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to link which video do you think I should link? I'll link our last conversation. So the last
Yeah.
conversation we had, what was the last one? It was food. We were talking about
Yes, which
uh
social eating, which I ate
yes,
a ton of food last Saturday. So I followed through with
speaking of
my
social
plan
eating.
and I
Yeah,
ate
pigs in a
all the
blanket.
brownies and all the pigs in a blanket.
There you go.
And
So
I
I'm going to
smoked
go
a
ahead.
cigar. I did it all.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna link that in the video description below. You're gonna see it pop up on the screen somewhere. Click on it. Listen to that conversation. Zach talked all about it last week about the pigs in the in a blanket that he's gonna prep for the. It was poker night, right?
Yep.
For the poker night, first one of the season for them, and he had the cigar. He had the other fun stuff, the brownies. So you're going to learn all about that in that video, as well as some helpful insights and advice from Zach and I, and a little bit more about the experiences that we have with social eating. So make sure that you watch that video next. Anyways, everyone, thanks so much for watching. Thank you as always, Zach.